Hello team, my name is Carl Nelson and this is for PM692. Today I'll be talking about communications and a communication plan. Communication is the key to any project or business. Most people believe that communication plan is the reason why projects are successful or they fail. First thing I'm going to talk about is some of the techniques for communicating effectively with your team. The first is transparency. Your team needs to know how you feel about things, what's going on, and they also have to tell you in return. That way, communication runs smoothly back and forth, and everybody knows what's going on. Next, you have to have objectivity and fairness. Everybody believes that everybody should be treated the same, and you have to have an open mind on what's going on and how your team is doing, and make sure they're doing everything correctly. Uh, Next, energy and motivation. This is the most important part. A lot of projects start off with a lot of energy and motivation. As a project manager, you don't have to give that energy to your team. They already have it. But as the life cycle of the project goes on, a lot of motivation wanes. So that's your job to get that energy and motivation back up, especially in the middle of a project. Next is clarity. Being clear and concise on what you want done and how things need to be done is very important and needs to be communicated to the team. Last is accessibility. The most important thing is being accessible to your teams, not just communicating what you want done, but allowing them to be able to contact you at any time and say, hey, this is what's going on and I need your help with this. So accessibility is, I believe, one of the key points in effective communication. Next, I'm going to talk a little about the do's and don'ts when communicating with project teams and stakeholders. Some of the do's is do maintain contact with stakeholders, making sure they're kept abreast of what's going on, whether or not you're meeting your timelines and benchmarks. Next is be transparent and engaging. Always engage with your team. Make sure they know that, hey, you're here to help. If they need help, if you need to pick up slack in one way or the other, or if they need you to reach out to different organizations to help along with the process. Next is know your role. Whether you're project manager or any other team member, knowing what you're supposed to do and when things are supposed to be done, knowing your role is very important. Next is manage expectations as a project manager. Stakeholders and customers always like to get different project forecasts and inflate numbers a little bit. So you need to manage the expectations of how the project is going to finish, when is it going to finish. That way they're not expecting things too early. Next, identify any warning signs or risks that may come up. So as a project manager, you need to communicate, hey, these are some risks or signs that are approaching, and this is how we need to mitigate those things going forward. Next, the don'ts. Don't reinvent the wheel. When you're starting a new project, a lot of people need to think that you need to start everything from scratch. If you already have some procedures in place or a good template for something, it's always good to use that. Everybody knows what's going on, so don't invent the wheel and you'll save a lot of time. Don't confuse monitoring with controlling. A lot of people like to control everything that's going on with the team members. It's better to just monitor, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, and let them be creative and accomplish the tasks on their own terms. Next, don't lose sight of the goals throughout the project. The different benchmarks that you have throughout the project are very important. It lets you know where you're at and where you need to be, so don't lose sight of those. Don't under communicate. Biggest thing is we like to think when things are rolling smooth that everybody has everything well in hand. They don't need help, and then we stop communicating as often as we should. And that's when things could go wrong. So don't under communicate. Lastly, don't forget about flexibility. As you progress in your project, a lot of times you're going to have different things pop up, different changes, more costs added. So be flexible. Be aware that those things are going to happen with the project, especially if it's a long project. So be flexible, and it'll help you in the future. Next, I'm going to talk about the major components of a communication plan. For me, there are 5 major components. Uh, a process. Everybody has to have a process on how you're going to do things and how things are going to be done so everybody knows what to do. Next, the objective. Knowing what the objective is uh, and communicating that objective to everybody is important. Next, goals. Like I talked about a little bit earlier, benchmarks throughout the project will help not only the project manager, stakeholders know how far along you are and where you need to be if you're ahead or behind the schedule. Next is a strategy on how everything's going to get done, which is very important. And lastly, a plan. That plan comes from the customers and the stakeholders of what they see the vision for the project is, and the overall plan uh, is the most important. Next, we're going to talk about how the success of a project and communication plan are tied together. If a project staff doesn't know what the tasks are, how to accomplish them, the entire project will grind to a halt. Also, the project staff doesn't know what to do, and if you don't know how to monitor that project, you can also run into issues. Lastly, if you're uncertain of what the customer or stakeholders expect of you, then the project can grind to a halt. That's why communication is so important, because you're communicating with so many different organizations, customers, stakeholders, and with your team. So if you're able to do all of those effectively, that's why they believe success is a direct tie-in with the success of the project. Lastly, what's the most important person or group when it comes to communication? A lot of people believe the most important person is the project manager because they lead the team. A lot of people believe that it's the stakeholders because they gave you the vision for the actual project. I personally believe it's the team themselves. The team itself works with not only the stakeholders, whether or not you're the project manager, and it also works with the customers, and it works with a lot of outside organizations to make the project possible. If you have great communication within your team, that team communicates with a whole bunch of different entities, and if the team does great at communication, then the project is a success, and that's why I believe that the actual team is the most important group. Thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to your feedback. Thank you.